Hi, welcome. We're continuing to look at eligibility, CalFresh eligibility for special populations. And today we'll continue with a look at students and the rules and requirements around students. My name is Edith, and I work with the California Association of Food Banks, and happy to be your host today. During the webinar, we're going to be using the question panel to your right. Feel free to go ahead and enter any questions that come up during the presentation. And also embedded in the presentation, we're going to have some questions that we're going to be asking you, some multiple choice questions, and we'll ask you to put your answers in the question box. The webinar will be recorded and posted. And again, this is one of the CalFresh eligibility series webinars that we've been presenting as we're looking at special populations and the CalFresh rules and eligibility around them. This one specifically looks at students. I also want to highlight that the last of the eligibility webinar series was originally intended to be the ABOD rules, but given that the Family First Coronavirus Response Act passed and include a provision that says that the ABOD time limit will not apply during a public health emergency. So this means that no counties in California or any other state are currently implementing the ABOD rules. So we've decided to postpone looking at CalFresh ABOD eligibility rules until we have to implement. We'll keep the same time and the registration links, and we're instead going to use the allotted time to talk about the changes as they relate to COVID-19 and some of the different bills and responses that have passed. So we're hoping to review things like disaster SNAP, emergency SNAP, pandemic EBT, etc. So with that, I'm super excited to have with us today Jaque Hess from the San Diego Hunger Coalition. She's the CalFresh program manager, and she's going to talk to us today about eligibility for students. So with that, Jaque, take it away.
Sounds good. Thanks so much, Edith. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. So the goal today is to provide clarity surrounding the complicated eligibility requirements for college students. So we have an agenda lined out. So we are going to go over the definitions of a college student and their income, some of the student exemptions. We'll also review student rules and things to consider. We'll also include some messaging and myths surrounding college students, a quick review, and then open it up for Q&A. So for definitions and income. So for CalFresh, a student is defined as a person that is between the ages of 18 and 49 that is physically and mentally able to work and is enrolled in a higher education school at least half-time. So half-time is defined by the higher education institution, and an individual is considered a student starting on the very first day of that school term. And it's important to note that the rules that we'll be covering today apply only to the person that is considered a college student and not the entire household if there are other people living in that house. If someone is attending a higher education institution but doesn't fall under the above definition for CalFresh, then they are not considered a student and are not subject to the student CalFresh rules. For example, if a person with a disability is between the ages of 18 and 49 and is attending college, they would not be considered a student under the CalFresh rules and would only be subject to the regular CalFresh eligibility rules. So higher education institutions. So this is going to include any business, trade, or vocational schools that normally require a high school diploma or a GED in order to enroll. So this also includes junior, community, 2-year or 4-year college or universities, graduate schools, regardless of whether a high school diploma or GED is required. I know Edith had mentioned some of the polls that we'll be doing throughout today's webinar. So for our first audience poll, so we have Melissa, who is 53 years old. She's excited to be in her first year at her local university. She's focusing on her schoolwork and not participating in any programs or working. Would she be considered a student by the CalFresh rules? So A, yes, since she is attending her local university. B, yes, since she is physically and mentally able to work. C, no, since she is not in high school. Or D, no, since she is not between 18 to 49 years of age. So you can go ahead and enter your answer in the question box.
Great. So, Jake, it looks like we're getting people who are between either A or D. Oh, we see a B too, a couple of Bs. A, B, or D are the answers I'm seeing.
Okay, so the answer is D. So even if she is enrolled in a university, paying tuition and completing coursework for a degree, Melissa would not be considered a student for the purposes of CalFresh because she falls outside of that definition of a college student. She is 53 years old, and for CalFresh, the student definition is 18 to 49. So this means that she would not have to meet the student requirements and would only need to meet the regular CalFresh eligibility rules. Okay, so next we'll go into income and what is counted and what is not counted for students. So it's important to know that money received from a work-study job is not counted. Also, money received from grants and scholarships. So this includes Pell Grants that are also known as Basic Education Opportunity Grants, Supplemental Educational Opportunity Grants, Robert C. Byrd Honors Scholarship Program, and special programs for students whose families are engaged in migrant and seasonal farm work. It also includes money received from loans. So that would be National Direct Student Loans, also known as Perkins Loans, Guaranteed Student Loans. This is the same loan program that is the source of PLUS loans and supplemental loans for students, and special programs for students from disadvantaged backgrounds, the source of TRIO loans. So all of the above are income that is not counted for students. Other income that's not counted. So this is money that is received as educational assistance that is intended to be used for educational expenses. So this would be educational expenses including tuition, any mandatory fees, materials, and supplies such as books, transportation, and dependent care. Money can come from various sources such as deferred payment loans, private grants, and private scholarships. So the definition of educational expenses does not include everyday living expenses such as rent or mortgage, personal clothing, or food that is eaten at home. And students may have to verify and document their allowable educational expenses. It's important to note that students should make sure that their CalFresh benefits are not being incorrectly reduced because the county has not taken into account that the financial aid was used for or intended to be used for educational expenses. So our next poll that we have, so we have Tony. He's a student that is applying for CalFresh and receiving income from multiple sources. Which income would be counted in determining his eligibility for CalFresh? A, income from a work-study job. B, income from his Pell Grant. C, income from his parents. Or D, income from his Perkins loans. If you'd like to enter your answer in the question box.
Great. We've gotten quite a few responses, and people are saying either A or C. Oh, we have a D too. A, C, D.
Okay, great. So the income that would be counted, so for the answer is C, that's going to be income from his parents. So only the money received from his parents would count as income on this list. And this is assuming that he's receiving the money directly. So if the parents were paying the bookstore directly for his textbooks and supplies, or paying for a bus pass or his tuition or other fees directly to the school, then it would not count as income. But since he's receiving that, it's considered a monetary gift from his parents, which would be counted in determining his eligibility for CalFresh. So now that we talked about income, next we're going to talk about exemptions. So students that are not working 20 hours a week must meet an exemption to qualify for CalFresh. So we have a list of exemptions that include a parent of a child under the age of 6, a parent of a child under the age of 12, but without childcare or is a single parent, if they're not expecting to be enrolled in the next term, if they are receiving CalWork, tribal TANF, TANF-funded Cal grants, A or B, or other TANF-funded benefits, if they are approved for work study, if they are attending school as part of an employment and training program, or attending school and participating in a program to increase employability. And it's important to note that if someone is approved for work study, but they are not given the opportunity, that still counts as an exemption. So next we have students participating in any of these programs are going to be exempt. So the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act, the Extended Opportunity Programs and Services, Educational Opportunity Program, College Disabled Students Programs and Services, and Student Academic Services, Cooperative Agencies Resources for Education Program, McNair Scholars, the Mathematics, Engineering, Science Achievement Program, Unaccompanied Refugee Minors Program, Guardian Scholars, Foster Youth Success Initiative, Cooperating Agencies Foster Youth Educational Support, the Jaque Education and Training Voucher Program, and Extended Foster Care. So even if a student does not qualify for CalFresh, other household members might. So with that information, next we're going to take another poll. And so which of the following is not a student exemption? A, being on their last year of school. B, working 20 hours a week. C, being the parent of a 4-year-old child. Or D, being the single parent of a 10-year-old child. And you can enter your answer in the question box.
So this one has been a little bit of a mixed bag. I think we have had every answer, A, B, C, and D. Maybe a little bit of confusion around the student exemption.
Okay, so as far as on this list, the only one that is not a student exemption is going to be A. So a student that is on their last year of school would still be subject to the student rules. Students become exempt when they don't anticipate enrolling in the next term. However, working 20 hours a week is an exemption. Being the parent of a 4-year-old child or being the single parent of a 10-year-old child would all qualify as a student exemption. So some other rules and things to consider when we are working with students. So students should apply in the county in which they live, which might be different from the county in which they attend school. Students can use their EBT card in any county. Students that are under 22 years of age and living with their parents have to apply with their parents. Students that are living together, they can have their own CalFresh case if they are purchasing and preparing their food separately. Receiving CalFresh will not impact their financial aid. And when it comes to college meal plans, students receiving more than half of their meals through a meal plan are not eligible for CalFresh. Even if the student doesn't qualify for CalFresh, other household members might. So next we'll address some common myths and concerns that we hear when working with college students. So one myth is that my financial aid will decrease if I get CalFresh. So this is not true. So CalFresh will not be impacted by the financial aid amount. We definitely want to encourage college students to apply. Another myth that we hear is that CalFresh is only for families with children. So this is also not true. CalFresh is for everyone who qualifies, including single adults. So whether someone is married, living alone, living with roommates, it really is for those that qualify and meet the eligibility guidelines. So I was approved for work study, but don't have a work study job, so I'm not eligible. Again, this is not true. So you might be eligible for CalFresh, even if you don't have a work study job, as long as you were approved for work study. So a lot of times the opportunity just might not be there, and so that's not held against that student. If they are approved for work study, that would help to make them eligible. And next, we hear this a lot, is that I missed my interview because the county called me during class. So it's important to know that if you applied in the last 30 days, you can always call the county to reschedule your interview to a time that's convenient for you. Okay, so next we will review the definitions, income, and exemptions that we went over. So again, for the purposes of CalFresh, a student is defined as someone between the ages of 18 to 49 that is able to work and who is enrolled in school at least half-time. Money that is received from work study and some grants and loans do not count in determining eligibility for CalFresh. However, students must meet an exemption to qualify for CalFresh. So we went over many exemptions, including being approved for work study and participating in a program that increases employability. Students that are receiving more than half their meals through a meal plan are not eligible for CalFresh. And students who don't live with their parents can have their own separate CalFresh case. However, students that are living with their parents and are under the age of 22 would have to apply with their parents. And lastly, receiving CalFresh will not impact that student's financial aid. So next, we would love to open it up to questions and hear what you might not want to know more about for college students. So we'll go ahead and if you want to enter any questions into the answer box.
Thank you, Jake, for that wonderful overview. It looks like we've gotten more questions so far. And that's around if student eligibility, if the 20-hour work rule for students will be waived during the COVID-19 outbreak. And I personally am not sure if it will. I don't know if you've heard otherwise, or Stephanie, if you're on the line, if you've heard anything about this either. So the state has requested a waiver from the federal government, but hasn't heard back yet. So we are hopeful that it will happen, but I haven't heard of it. So we haven't gotten a response yet, and I haven't heard of other states who have gotten the waiver yet, but the state is trying. But also, I think it's worth mentioning that the STAR 7s and recertifications, just given the current public health situation, are being, workers aren't supposed to be processing them for the next 3 months, or through the end of May, I believe. And so unless somebody goes over their IRT, they don't need to report. Great. Someone is asking, another question is, what if a student is attending school in a different state? So I'm guessing out of state. I think we would say that in California, students have to apply in the county in which they live in. And so if a student is going to school out of state and living out of state, they probably have to apply in that state. Jaque and Stephanie, I'm not sure if you have anything else to add. Yeah, I think if somebody is living out of state, they would be a resident of that state. Right. Another question is, for those who are in dorms, how are shelter costs counted? I think I'm not sure. It's been so long since I've worked with college students. I'm not sure if do they ever get explicitly how much their dorm portion is, or is it part of a complete package of costs? I'm not sure. Steph and Jaque, do you guys know?
I don't, but that's a really good question. So yeah, we can definitely look into that and share that information as far as how the shelter cost counts and how to show what you're paying if you are living in a dorm.
Yeah, we'll take that back and send out the answer when we send out the slides and recording. Another question says, during summer break, should students keep their case open in the county in which they live in and go to school in, or should they close their case and be added to their parents' case in another county? I know that there's specific rules around this, but I don't remember it off the top of my head. Jaque or Stephanie, do you remember?
So the question is, if they're moving back home over the summer break, if they need to update their CalFresh case?
Yeah, if they should keep their case open in the same county, or if they should close it and try to get added to their parents' case or try to transfer their case.
I'm not 100% positive. I know it's really complicated when it comes with college students since they're constantly moving back and forth.
Stephanie, do you remember? So we'll go ahead and take this one back too, and then we will get back to the group when we send out the slides. I don't want to misspeak. And someone else is asking if we can elaborate on Cal Grant A requirements. And I think this is getting at the exemptions. And so the idea is that students, in order to get, so someone who meets the CalFresh student definition, so again is 18 to 49, able-bodied, not disabled, and going at least to school half-time at an institution of higher education, they would have to work at least 20 hours a week or be exempt in order to qualify for CalFresh. One of the exemptions includes people who are receiving CalWorks, tribal TANF, and any other TANF-funded grants. So that includes Cal Grant A or B, or any other TANF-funded benefit. And so I think if a student is receiving a Cal Grant A, I believe that they are not all, maybe not all Cal Grants are TANF funded. And so I think that there's a form or notice that they can request from the financial aid office that clarifies that their Cal Grant is in fact TANF funded, and then they would submit that as a verification that they are therefore then exempt and eligible for CalFresh and don't have to meet the 20 hours a week work requirement. Do you guys have anything else to add on that?
The only thing that I would add is, yeah, I saw that that letter does go out to those that are Cal Grant A or B recipients that is TANF funded. So the student will receive that or can request that to turn that in as their verification.
Great. We are getting a question about if clients are able to purchase food online with their EBT card, and this is in regards to the current COVID-19 situation. I would answer this question by saying I think that there's a lot of moving pieces in place for this to happen, but it's not yet something that has been able to happen. This was a question that recently came up on the SNAP listserv, so I would encourage you to look. I believe Jessica Bartholow sent out a link with a lot of resources on the SNAP listserv, maybe yesterday or the day before, and we can go ahead and include those as well when we send out the slides and the recording. We have another question about what would be an example of an employment training program and vocational school. And so I think this is getting at either perhaps the higher institution. So when we talk about the student roles and the student definition, we said that it includes people who are enrolled in higher education school. And so then we're saying that higher education institutions include things aside from colleges and universities and community colleges. It also includes business, trades, or vocational schools. And so these might be schools that focus on a specific trade. So if you're going to school to become a mechanic or any kind of other like vocational training, a medical assistant or something like that, that would be a vocational school. And then if so, then you're considered a student. And in order to get CalFresh, you have to either work 20 hours a week or be exempt. And so one of the exemptions is participating in an employment and training program. And so there's a lot of different options as to what that might be. It could be a program through the unemployment office. It could be a program through a school, as we mentioned, all of these lists. So something like the McNair Scholars or an employment and training program through the Workforce Innovation and Opportunity Act. So there's a lot of different options. I think most of the time your clients will know if they're participating in something like this. So they might be able to tell you the name and you could then look it up to see if it's on the list, or if not, look at perhaps ways to get it on the list. We've received another question about if a student is going home out of state for the summer, if they'll still be able to use their EBT card. And so again, when we send out the slides, we'll include more information on what happens during the summer when the student is coming back home. But in terms of being able to use the EBT card should be able to be used in any county throughout California and even out of state as well. To find retailers, you can go to the USDA or FNS website, and it's a SNAP retailer, and it'll give you different locations where the EBT card is accepted. Generally, anywhere that shows the Quest symbol is where clients can use their EBT card. I think one of the other things that we've seen with students using their EBT card outside of the main county in which they have applied and live in is that sometimes the county is able to see that the EBT card is being used out of county or out of state. And so in some cases, we've heard of counties reaching out to verify that the client still lives in the county. And in that case, you just want to verify that you do still live, but you are totally allowed to use your EBT card outside of the county and even outside of the state. And the question is then, should the student apply in the state in which they are living and going to school in? And the answer would be yes. We have another question around someone who's working with students that are receiving VA benefits and wondering how does that affect receiving CalFresh, and how is physically and mentally able to work defined. There are many student veterans that are in some sort of rehab program that are trying to either enter the workforce but has in fact a service-connected disability. I believe that physical or mental ability to work is defined based on ability of, if someone is receiving, a disability benefit or in this case, a service-connected disability benefit, they would perhaps not be considered physically and mentally able to work. But this is another question that we can try to look into and send out more information when we send out the slides and recording. Jaque, your staff, do you have anything else to add? Go ahead.
For disability, it's like with any other CalFresh applicant, they have to be receiving some sort of disability-based payment, like through SSI or SSD. But then for inability to work because of a physical or mental disability, it can be, if there is somebody who can attest to it, like a doctor or a psychologist or a nurse or a case manager or somebody, then that will suffice. Or if that's not available, then actually, let me read this. But this is not a situation where a client statement is acceptable. So there has to be somebody, a third party. If the person isn't getting disability-based income, then there has to be somebody who will who can attest to their inability to work.
Great, thank you for that. We have another question, and this one says, if someone's between the ages of 18 through 49 and is attending military school or training, would they be considered students? I believe this is getting at what is considered attending a higher education institution. I don't think military training is in the list, but we can double check. Another question about students out of state again, so just want to clarify. So if a California resident goes to school out of state, the question is, should they apply in California or in the state they go to school in? So perhaps they're still maintaining California resident status for tax purposes, but as long as they are living and going to school out of state, they should apply in the state in which they should apply for CalFresh, the state in which they live. So those are all the questions that I'm seeing for now. If you have more questions, please go ahead and type them in. We still have some time. In the meantime, I want to tell you about our next webinar, which again, we've modified it to, we're no longer going to be looking at the ABOD rules until we get a little closer to having to implement those, since we're putting those on pause. But we do want to, in fact, talk about some of the changes that have happened to SNAP related to COVID-19, and we'll hope that you can join us next Thursday at 10 a.m. The registration link is on the slides and has been emailed out, and we'll email it out again with the recording and the slides. And I am not seeing any other new questions come in. So thank you. I want to thank you all for participating, and thank you, Jake, so much for joining us and giving us a really good information today around students.
Yeah, thanks so much, guys.
Thank you.